Welcome to your favorite podcast, Faith Unfiltered. I have a question for you before we start unpacking today's documents. When you think of the word silence, what comes to mind?
Silence. Um, well, I suppose it depends on the context. Probably early morning, when everyone's still asleep.
Okay.
Or maybe that moment just before a big storm when the air just feels heavy and still.
Exactly. That kind of silence that has a weight to it. Now, I want you to imagine multiplying that feeling by 1,000. Today, we're going through a stack of documents, ancient texts, linguistic analyses, psychological profiles that take us to a very specific moment in human history.
And we're not talking about children's story today.
Not at all. Forget the Sunday school cartoons. We are situated chronologically right after the gates of Eden have closed.
The exile. The great original chroma.
The exile, yes. And the thing that struck me from all the sources we reviewed for this deep dive is how they describe the atmosphere of that precise moment. It's not just sadness or, nostalgia for what was lost. It's an absolute sensory trauma. Think about it. Adam and Eve have gone from a reality of, let's call it harmonic noise birds, clear water, the voice of the divine walking in the cool of the day, to a world that is, well, it's sterile. It's a mute world.
It's interesting you start there because I have a note right here about the Hebrew word used for the ground outside of Eden. It's Adamah, of course, which is where the name Adam comes from.
Sure.
But in this context, it's a land that's described as almost rebellious. Imagine the psychological shock for that first couple. You wake up one day and reality itself is hostile to you. The ground doesn't give you food. You have to rip it out. You have to sweat to eat. You have to bleed just to survive.
That transition is just brutal. To go from being a steward of abundance to really a slave to scarcity. And in the middle of that hostile silence, that fear of exposure or the unknown, the first baby is born. And this is where I really want us to slow down, because most people, when they read this story, they just skip over the birth to get to the bloody part, to the murder.
Right, they rush to the main event.
But according to the psychologists and theologians we read for this, you cannot understand the crime if you don't first understand the cradle.
I completely agree. If we ignore that early family dynamic, the murder just seems like a sudden act of madness. But if you analyze the origin, you see it was something that was slow-cooked for years.
I mean, we're talking about the very first time a human being sees another human being born naturally.
There were no hospitals, no instruction manuals, no precedent for any of this. There was only this desperate hope placed on that one child.
Let's talk about that hope.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the names, because I know you love etymology and there's so much to unpack here. The firstborn arrives. He's named Cain. In our English Bibles, we read that Eve says something like, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man."
It sounds pious. It sounds grateful.
It sounds humble, doesn't it?
It does. But if you go back to the original text and you look at the notes from experts in Semitic languages, the picture changes radically. The name Cain comes from the root Cain, which is linked to the verb kana.
And what exactly does kana mean?
It means to acquire, to possess, to create, or even to forge. There are scholars who suggest that the most literal translation of Eve's exclamation isn't a prayer of thanks, but a shout of triumph, almost of arrogance.
Wait.
She's essentially saying, I have created a man.
Are you saying she's putting herself on the same level as God?
It's a very valid interpretation according to the sources. I mean, think about her logic. God created man from the dust. Now I, Eve, have created a man from my own body. It's like she's saying, I have acquired a man just like the Lord. She sees Cain as a personal victory over the fall.
That changes the entire mother-son dynamic. It's not just maternal love, it's pride. She's thinking, okay, we messed up, we lost the garden, we got kicked out, but here's the solution. She sees Cain as the ticket back to paradise.
Exactly. Cain isn't just a child. He's the expected messiah of that family. He is the possession. Imagine growing up with that burden on your shoulders. From the moment you learn to walk, you are the savior of the family. You are your parents' survival strategy.
So Cain grows up knowing he is the most important thing that has happened since the creation.
And this is reflected in his profession, don't you think?
Yes, he becomes a farmer, a tiller of the ground. And it makes perfect sense if you think about it. His father, Adam, was cursed by the ground. The ground rebelled against him. So Cain, the strong son, the achievement, decides he is going to dominate that ground. He's going to subdue the enemy that defeated his father.
He's the man of effort,
Yeah.
the man of, primitive agricultural technology. Cain looks at the soil and says, I am going to force you to produce. It's a posture of strength, of conquest. He becomes, as one of the sources put it, as hard as the earth he tilled.
He is the golden child, the one who brings bread to the table, the pillar of the family. And then, well, then the story gets complicated because the second son is born. And here, the contrast could not be more radical. What did you find on Abel?
Yeah.
Because his introduction in the text is, well, it's depressing, to say the least.
Poor Abel. If Cain is the possession, the achievement, the solid thing, Abel is nothing. His name in Hebrew is Hevel.
Hevel. That word sounds so familiar. I've heard it in other biblical contexts.
You definitely have. It's the key word in the book of Ecclesiastes. When the translation says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, it's actually saying Hevel of Hevels.
And what does it mean?
It means vapor, breath, mist.
Mist.
Yes. Something you see on a cold morning, it seems like it's there, but when you try to grab it with your hand, there's nothing. It just dissipates.
That's brutal if you think about that being the name his mother gave him. What does that tell us about how Eve saw her second son?
It tells us that compared to Cain, Abel just didn't count. Perhaps Eve had already realized how hard life outside of Eden was and didn't have much hope. Or maybe, after the euphoria of having the savior Cain, the second son was just seen as superfluous.
An afterthought.
A sigh. Someone who is here today and gone tomorrow.
So you have the conqueror of the earth and Mr. Nobody living under the same roof. One is the center of the family universe, the other is essentially invisible.
And Abel's temperament fits his name. While Cain battles with the earth, Abel becomes a shepherd. And there's a profound philosophical distinction here that the sources highlight.
Go on.
The shepherd doesn't force nature. The shepherd doesn't violently extract resources. The shepherd cares. The shepherd observes. The shepherd protects life. He doesn't manufacture it.
It's much more a contemplative posture.
Much more. Abel lives with an awareness of the fragility of life. He knows he is vapor. He knows his sheep are vulnerable. Cain believes he can control everything with his strength. Abel understands that life is a fragile gift that must be guarded.
So the stage is set. You have two opposing worldviews clashing at the dinner table every night. The stern farmer, master of the land, proud of his strength, and the quiet shepherd, who watches the stars and understands his own smallness.
But, and this is crucial, the sources insist that they weren't declared enemies at first.
Right, there's no open warfare.
No. They shared the same sky, the same parents, the same basic instruction about God. But there was a fundamental difference in how they perceived reality. One source said something that really stuck with me. They both believed, but they believed differently.
And that theological difference is what leads us to the edge of the abyss.
It's the whole story.
Let's dig into that, because it takes us directly to the catalyst for the entire conflict. There comes a point in the narrative, maybe years later when they're adults, that they decide to make an offering. I want to clarify this for anyone listening because it's a common mistake.
Yeah.
The text says it wasn't an obligation. There was no Leviticus, no written commandments, no Moses saying, bring your tithes.
Exactly. It was a voluntary act. It came from them. It was an attempt to connect with the divine, to acknowledge that there's something higher than them. And this is where the story is so often terribly misinterpreted in popular culture.
Yes, the typical explanation of God likes meat and hates vegetables.
Softly. Yes, which is absurd. God is the creator of everything. He doesn't have culinary preferences. To think he rejected Cain because he brought wheat instead of a lamb is to completely misunderstand the divine character presented in the text.
The problem wasn't the menu.
The problem was the intention.
Let's break down what each of them offered with a magnifying glass based on the text we have. Let's start with Cain.
Cain brought fruit of the soil, but the source text adds a sort of side note about the quality and the attitude. It doesn't say he brought the best, it just says he brought some of the fruit. And analysts suggest he did it out of duty, out of routine.
It's a transactional mindset, isn't it? I give you this, God, so that you'll bless my crops.
Yes.
Or I'll give you this so you'll leave me alone and not send the plague.
It's the mindset of a religious bribe. I'm doing my part. Cain sees God as a cosmic landlord to whom he has to pay rent. It's cold, it's bureaucratic. Cain trusts in his own effort. The offering is just a formality to ensure his own success.
And on the other hand, you have Abel, the vapor. What does he do differently?
The text is incredibly specific here. Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock.
Firstborn and fat portions.
Yeah.
Translate that into emotional language for us.
It means Abel went to his flock, he looked at his animals, and he chose the best, the most valuable, the one that cost him the most to raise, the one he loved the most. And he sacrificed it. He didn't give what was left over. He gave of himself through his offering.
So he wasn't trying to buy God off.
Not at all. He was expressing radical gratitude. He was saying, everything I have is yours and you are worth more than my possessions.
The difference is abyssal. One gives
Yeah.
a tip, the other surrenders his heart. And then the moment happens that breaks the story, the divine response, or rather, the selective response.
Yes.
God accepts Abel's offering. He looks on it with favor. But Cain's offering, he does not. And this is where I want us to pause on the reaction. Because there wasn't thunder, fire didn't come down from heaven to burn Cain. It was something much more subtle, right?
It was the silence of God, a silent response. Simply put, favor did not rest on him. And for someone with Cain's ego, that silence was deafening.
Imagine the blow.
He, the firstborn, he, Eve's acquisition, he, the one who works harder, who sweats blood breaking the cursed ground. How is it possible that God prefers the vapor, the fragile one, the one who just sits and watches sheep all day?
There it is, the narcissistic wound. The source identifies this precise moment as the birth of envy. And I want us to clarify the difference between jealousy and envy, because the source makes a very fine psychological distinction here.
Yes, it's crucial. Jealousy is when you're afraid of losing something you have. Envy is when you are pained by what someone else has. Cain didn't want to be a shepherd. He didn't want Abel's flock.
He didn't want his stuff.
No. What hurt him, what burned inside him, was that Abel was accepted. Abel's good became Cain's evil.
It's that malignant sadness at someone else's well-being. Cain doesn't ask, what did I do wrong, or how can I improve my heart? His internal question is, why him and not me?
That comparison is the poison. The text says envy enters the heart, and you have to distinguish this. Cain didn't hate Abel before the offering, or at least not on this level. He began to hate him because God loved him.
Abel became a mirror.
A mirror that showed Cain his own flaws, and nobody wants to look into that mirror.
And Cain is left to stew in this. The rejection, the source says his face fell. He was downcast with shame, with anger, with disappointment. And now we enter the part I call the descent, because, and this really surprised me rereading the texts, God doesn't abandon Cain in that moment.
No, and this is one of the greatest and most often ignored displays of mercy in the entire account. God intervenes. Before any crime happens, God comes down. He has basically an emergency therapy session with Cain.
Yes, he asks him two questions. Why are you angry, and why is your face fallen?
God knows the answer, of course, but he's giving Cain the opportunity to verbalize it. It's an invitation to introspection. Cain, put words to what you're feeling before what you're feeling takes control.
But Cain doesn't answer. He stays silent. And then God gives the warning. And this, for our listeners, is where the story takes a turn into psychological terror. I have this phrase marked and read in my notes because it is unique in the entire biblical text up to this point. God tells him, sin is crouching at your door.
It's the very first time the word sinhada appears in the Bible. And it doesn't show up as an abstract concept like breaking a rule. It shows up personified.
Let's read the exact description from the source that analyzes the Hebrew. Sin is crouching at the door. The Hebrew word used there, rovetz, is the same word used to describe a predatory animal, a beast, tensing its muscles before it springs on its prey.
It's a chilling image. God is telling Cain, you're not alone in your head. There is something alive, something hungry, a dark entity that is crouched at the threshold of your consciousness.
And listen to what he adds. It desires to have you.
It desires you. That phrase implies a ravenous will. Evil wants to consume Cain. It wants to possess him. It's almost like a demonic possession being described, but without removing human responsibility.
Exactly. Because the but that follows is the most important word in the story. God tells him, but you must rule over it.
You can master it.
Let's just stop there for a second, because this shatters so many modern ideas that we're just slaves to our impulses. Many today would say, well, Cain had a difficult childhood, a lot of pressure. It's natural for him to be violent. But the ancient text says, yes, the beast is there. Yes, it's hungry, but you have a will. You have the capacity to say no. You can shut the door.
And that makes what happens next so much more tragic. Because Cain isn't a passive victim of an uncontrollable impulse. He's a man who receives a direct divine warning, looks the beast in the eye, and decides to open the door for it.
The tragedy of human freedom. He could have mastered it, but he chose not to. And this is where the psychology of resentment that our sources mention comes in. Cain doesn't answer God. He remains silent. And that's silence. That silence is the petri dish.
The silence is dangerous. When we don't speak our pain, it festers. Cain transforms his sadness into anger and his anger into a cold, calculated resentment. He builds a false narrative in his head. Right.
He convinces himself that Abel is the obstacle to his happiness.
If Abel weren't here, God would look at me. It's the logic of elimination.
Precisely. When we believe that our problem is another person, violence becomes, in our sick mind, a logical solution. And so, Cain plans. This is not a fit of rage. It is a plan.
And that plan takes us to the field, to the execution. The way it happens is what gets me. It's not a shouted argument at dinner. There's an invitation.
Let's go out to the field.
Those words are terrifying in their normality. Cain invites his brother to the place where he has control, to the lonely place, away from the eyes of his parents. The tone is calm, the source says, masking the intent.
And Abel goes. Why wouldn't he? It's his big brother, his hero, probably. Abel goes, trusting. And they walk together. Imagine the sound of their footsteps on that dry earth. The silence of the outside world contrasting with the deafening noise inside Cain's head.
And there, in the middle of nowhere, Cain rises up. The source emphasizes this was not a fight that got out of hand. It was not self-defense. It was a unilateral attack. It was the deliberate destruction of the other. Cain attacks the image of God in his brother.
And when Abel falls, when he stops breathing, the source describes something that gave me goosebumps. It says the silence returns, but it's different now. Now it is heavy, charged, almost alive.
It's the silence of irreversibility. The first human being has died. And he didn't die of old age, surrounded by grandchildren, in peace. He died murdered by the only other person of his generation. Innocence was absolutely shattered. A line was crossed that could never be uncrossed.
And there's a detail in the source about the internal consequences for the murderer. Cain realizes, maybe in that very instant, that in killing his brother, something inside of himself has also died. He's not the same person. He has lost his humanity.
He has become what God warned him about. The beast came in and devoured him from the inside out.
But the silence in the field doesn't last long. The voice returns. The same voice that walked in the garden. And the trial begins.
It returns with the question that echoes through the centuries. Where is your brother Abel?
Again, God asking questions
Right.
he already knows the answer to. It's like a prosecutor who already has the evidence, but wants to see if the accused will confess.
He's looking for confession, yes. He's giving Cain, even with fresh blood on his hands, one last chance to tell the truth, to break, to fall on his knees and say, my God, what have I done? Help me. Mercy was still available, I think.
But Cain's heart is armored. It's so hardened, so defensive, that he responds with the first recorded lie in human history.
I don't know. A direct lie to the face of omniscience, and then that infamous, sarcastic, defiant question. Am I my brother's keeper?
That question, Hasho Marachi Inochi, in the original. Let's analyze that, because it's not just an excuse. It's a declaration of principles.
It's the total rejection of communal responsibility. Cain is saying, he's not my problem. I am an individual. I look out for myself. His life is not my responsibility. It's the exact opposite of love. If love is saying, your life is my life, the spirit of Cain says, your death doesn't affect me.
By saying that, Cain establishes indifference as the norm for broken human relationships. It is the precise moment we disconnect from our neighbor.
It's the birth of individualism in its most toxic form.
But God doesn't let that lie stand. This is where the solemnity in the account reaches its peak. God says to him, the voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground.
That imagery is so powerful. The earth is a witness. The earth is a prosecutor. Cain thought that by burying the body or leaving it in the lonely field, the crime would disappear. If no one saw it, it didn't happen. But the moral reality of the universe these texts present is that innocent blood has a voice. It cannot be silenced. The crime screams.
It's a thought that is both terrifying and hopeful. Nothing is hidden. Justice cries out. And so we come to the sentence. And this surprises a lot of listeners, I'm sure, because if we apply our human logic of retributive justice, Cain should die right there. An eye for an eye, a life for a life.
Yes, you'd expect a lightning bolt.
But God does something unexpected.
God does not execute him, and the source highlights this as a key deviation. The punishment is severe, but it is not lethal. The punishment attacks Cain's very identity. Remember, who was Cain?
The farmer, the dominator of the earth.
Exactly. And so what is the curse? Cursed are you from the ground. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you.
He takes away his job. He takes away his passion. He takes away his source of pride and sustenance.
The earth, which drank Abel's blood, now refuses to respond to Cain. It's poetic and it's terrible. His bond with the soil is broken, and he is condemned to be a fugitive, a wanderer.
A restless wanderer. For a man who valued possession, kana, stability, owning things, being a homeless wanderer is a fate worse than death.
And Cain's reaction to the sentence is so revealing of his character. Notice what he says. He doesn't say, Poor Abel, I miss him. He doesn't say, "Forgive me, God, I have sinned." He says, "My punishment is more than I can bear."
He's still focused on himself. It's pure self-pity.
Absolutely. He's crying about the consequences, not the crime. He's the victim in his own story. And then he confesses his fear. "Whoever finds me will kill me." Cain, the man who introduced murder to the world, now lives in terror of having the same medicine applied to him.
It's the paranoia of the violent. The one who kills always lives in fear of being killed. He knows he's opened the door to violence, and he's terrified that violence will turn on him.
And this is where we get the great mystery, one of the most debated parts, the mark of Cain.
Yes, let's talk about that. A lot of people think the mark was something hideous, a sign of shame, like a scarlet letter on his forehead so everyone would know he was a murderer.
But the source corrects us. In the ancient context, the mark was not to shame him, but to protect him.
Protect the murderer. That sounds unjust.
It is a theological paradox. It's a severe mercy. God puts a sign on Cain to warn others. Do not touch this man. Why? Because God refuses to allow the cycle of vengeance to begin right there and then. If someone kills Cain to avenge Abel, then someone will have to kill Cain's avenger, and on and on. God stops the hemorrhage of violence before it can even start.
So, he doesn't approve of the crime, but he protects the criminal from vigilante justice.
Exactly. He allows him to live. But what kind of life is it? It's a life with his memory, a life knowing what he did. The mark protects him from others, but as the source says so sharply, the mark does not protect him from himself. It doesn't protect him from his conscience.
And so Cain leaves. He goes out from the Lord's presence, and he goes to the land of Nod.
Which literally means land of wandering, the place of no place.
And this brings us to the legacy part, because life goes on. And Cain, the murderer, the wanderer, he doesn't just sit around and cry. He builds.
Yes, and this is fascinating. Cain starts a family, and he builds the first city recorded in the Bible. And this is a brilliant insight from the source. Evil can build. Evil can create civilization, technology, progress. Cain is the father of urban life, of metallurgy, of the arts, through his descendants.
But he builds from a place of fear, doesn't he?
Yes, he builds walled cities because he is afraid. He's looking for the security and walls that he lost when he broke his relationship with God and his brother. It is a brilliant but anxious civilization, a civilization without peace.
And his lineage doesn't exactly improve morally. The source mentions a descendant, Lamech, several generations later.
Lamech is Cain evolved. If Cain killed and tried to hide it, Lamech kills and writes a song about it. He boasts to his wives, "I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me."
It's the escalation of violence. What was a hidden tragedy in Cain becomes public pride in Lamech. Violence becomes an identity, a culture. It's celebrated. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times.
It's the culture of total impunity. That's the seed of Cain bearing its bitter fruit. A society that is technologically advanced, but morally bankrupt.
It's a bleak picture, but a necessary one to understand where we are. And now, I want us to turn the mirror. Because we said at the beginning, this isn't some foreign story. It's not a fairy tale. Let's get to the practical application.
The question, "Where is your brother?" didn't get stuck in that field thousands of years ago. It's a living question. It's a question being asked of you and me every single day.
What do you mean specifically today?
It applies to your neighbor, to your professional rival, to the coworker who gets the promotion you desperately wanted, to the family member you're not speaking to because of an inheritance dispute.
The source argues that, contrary to Cain's sarcastic reply, we are our brother's keeper.
Absolutely. We're responsible for one another. Cain is an uncomfortable mirror because we all like to think we're Abel, the innocent victim. "Oh, poor me, the world treats me so badly." But the psychological reality is we have a lot of Cain in us.
That tendency to compare.
That tendency to measure our worth against the failure of others. That pride that refuses to be corrected. That ability to nurse grudges in silence. To not respond to God's invitation to let go of anger.
He isn't some mythological monster.
No, Cain is uncomfortably human. He's a worker, a son, a believer. He's the guy next door. She's us on our worst days.
And what about Abel? The source calls him the silent justice. It seems like he lost. He died young, no kids, no city to his name.
In the eyes of the world, Abel was a loser, but the eternal perspective is different. Abel represents all those who do the right thing without waiting for applause. Those who offer the best of themselves, not for reward, but out of love. And his legacy isn't bricks and walls. His legacy is that his blood still speaks.
That's a beautiful concept. Integrity has an echo.
It does. Every time someone chooses integrity over convenience, every time someone chooses to forgive instead of getting revenge, it's an echo of Abel. His life was brief, like vapor, but his impact is eternal.
So we're left with two paths, and I think that's the conclusion all this material leads us to.
Yes, there's no real middle ground. There's the path of wounded pride, of self-protection at all costs, which is Cain's path. Or there's the path of sincere surrender, of vulnerability, which is Abel's. And God's warning is still valid today, right now, for every single person listening. Sin is crouching at your door.
The beast is still there.
Still crouched, still desiring you. But we are not helpless before it. We can rule over it. But it requires a brutal honesty with ourselves that Cain didn't have. It requires speaking. It requires confession. It requires taking responsibility for our brother.
It's incredible how a text this ancient can read like such a precise diagnosis of our current society, of our own hearts.
It's because human nature hasn't changed. We've changed the tools. Cain used a rock or a jawbone. We use words on social media or unjust laws. We've changed the clothes, but the heart is still fighting with the same beasts crouched at the door.
To close, I want to leave you with this final thought that we've pulled from all this analysis, something for you to take home and chew on this week. Before the hand strikes, the heart has already fallen. Before the visible act of violence, there was an invisible, internal decision to dehumanize the other.
That's it. Check your heart. Check your silences. And remember that the question is still floating in the air, waiting for a better answer than Cain's. Where is your brother?
Thank you for joining us on this deep, dense, and necessary journey to the origins of our condition. Thank you for letting us be part of your reflection. This was Faith Unfiltered. Until next time.